All right, y'all. First of all, thank you all for being here. Can we get a big shout out for Multichain Day? I know we got, you know what I mean? Sheesh. And to all the sponsors and all the speakers, like this great speaker right here. Garen, thank you so much for doing this, by the way, man.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Yeah, of course. So I guess let's just get into it a little bit. I would love if you could just give people a bit of introduction about yourself, a little intro about Stellar, and let's dive in.
Yeah, so my name's Garen. I work on protocol at the Stellar Development Foundation. Stellar is one of the oldest Layer 1 blockchains. We launched mainnet about 6 months before Ethereum, and we are fully smart contract complete. We have a focus on stablecoin and RWAs, and so we do things a little bit differently too. We don't do proof of stake, we don't do proof of work, but we have our own consensus algorithm called a Stellar Consensus Protocol that has a bit of a different sort of a trust framework that makes it, in my mind, more better for institutions and sort of the enterprise use cases.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that we had talked about before we started, right? Like my introduction into the industry was the work that you all were doing in 2014, 2015. And the industry overall has changed a ton. Stellar has changed a ton. And I'd love for us to kind of talk about, the idea behind this talk is talking about, this invisible tax that, we're trying to address. Can you talk to folks a little bit about what that is and what Stellar is doing to address it?
Yeah, so the invisible tax is this thing called MEV, or maximum extractable value, also machine extractable value. And it's basically the profit that validators can generate from manipulating the order of user transactions. And so I think there's some misconceptions about how blockchains work and how proof of stake and proof of work, where how they think that, it's this neutral, entity that's decentralized, so everything must be okay and good. But that's actually not the case. I think in practice, these are very adversarial networks where the validators are actually colluding against users in many instances. And so basically, MEV is, while you are paying a small transaction fee on a network like Solana or an Ethereum network, the actual cost is much higher because while the fee may be low, you are getting sort of worse order execution, and the validators that are operating the network themselves are trading against you.
And so from a user perspective, what can they do about that?
Well, so not much. I think basically what happens is to kind of take a step back and explain how MEV works.
Please.
In proof of stake, every slot or every block, a single node is selected to sort of construct the block and decide what transactions get included and what order those transactions are. And so what that validator will do is they'll basically see what asset users are trying to buy, and the validator themselves will insert their own transactions to buy up all the supply, jack up the price, and then sell it to the actual user at a higher price. Now, this is unfair because it's not users competing against users, but it's the validator themselves that are producing these transaction sets that look at everything, decide the order, and manipulate the order however they want. Now, after the leader node has actually constructed that block, they then send it to the rest of the network, and that's when you have the voting and everything else. But it's actually a two-step process where you select a single node that doesn't have to ask any other nodes for consensus to actually construct that block, do all the market manipulation, and then after doing that manipulation alone, that's when everyone else gets to see the vote on the block. So while the validation and the voting of the block is decentralized, the actual construction and deciding what order transactions execute is highly, highly centralized on a single node at a time.
So this is something we spoke about before, right? Like I think that the gold standard of the industry right now is proof of stake. And, we're pointing out some very real issues with it. How does Stellar fix this? Like walk us through a little bit of how they can change the standard.
Yeah, so the issue with proof of stake is that you're actually giving lots of power to anonymous nodes, and you don't actually know who these people are. So any node can become a leader or sort of have the opportunity to construct these blocks just by providing the minimum stake. If you look at Solana or Ethereum, that's only a couple $1,000s. Now, the issue with proof of stake is that it assumes everyone is a good actor until proven otherwise. And so it assumes that you are a good validator, and if you misbehave, then they take your tokens and slash. The issue is, MEV is actually not something that's considered bad behavior. The networks don't actually slash if you're doing MEV. And so you can actually still be a good validator, but screw over your users and sort of have these extractive processes that people don't actually realize are happening most of the time.
So that's kind of one of the things I wanted to touch on, right? Because I think a lot of the industry sees things like this as a necessary evil. Can you kind of walk through like how not only can this be like curbed, it's actually in everyone's interest?
Yeah, so I think people just assume that MEV is intrinsic to blockchain. how
Yeah.
every blockchain is like, oh, of course, you have a decentralized system. People are going to try to make as most money as possible. But this can really only happen because proof of stake has no way of punishing people who are extracting this value, right? You allow anyone to enter at any time, and there's no recourse for if they do participate in these bad behaviors. So Stellar works fundamentally differently. We have a consensus algorithm called Stellar Consensus Protocol, or SCP. And what this does is there is no stake and there is no work. Rather, anyone can run a validator, and you actually decide locally who you want to trust and talk to. So if I spin up a validator, I would say, hey, Franklin Templeton is this company that runs Stellar validators. They seem noteworthy because they're a Fortune 500 company. So I'm choosing to trust them, right? And so you basically, it's still open and decentralized. There is no, like central authority who selects what nodes are trustworthy or not. But you locally, on your own validator, choose explicitly who you trust. Now, how does this work for MEV? If I'm running a validator, I don't have to listen to some anonymous entity that just popped up somewhere that may or may not be doing MEV. I can choose the validators I want to listen to. I can choose the validators that get to order my blocks and order my transactions. And if they do try to screw me over and reorder transactions or do MEV, I can just remove them from my trusted set. And so you actually have local authority to sort of do like a soft slash, where you basically say, this entity has lost my trust. Proof of stake has no concept of this, right? Either everyone slashes someone or no one does. And the networks, for whatever reason, well, because it's highly profitable, have decided that MEV is not going to be punished, and so they don't. Whereas on Stellar, you can slash someone locally for whatever reason, right? And so you have authority to actually determine who handles your blocks.
That's really interesting. I have a question about that I want to circle back to, but we had also talked about how like there's this kind of back and forth between, further centralizing or further decentralizing for one reason or another. And we talked about how there are people who are trying to solve this very issue by going further into centralization, but it really, as we talked about, it adds more complexity and it reduces speed and performance. So just for people that are listening and, kind of picking up what you're putting down, like, how is it that this is possible with SCP?
Well,
It maintains decentralization at the same time, not impacting.
yeah, so I think the whole reason is that SCP is one of the only federated consensus algorithms.
Okay.
That's a fancy computer science term. But what that means is that there's actually no big group of validators, right? So on proof of stake, there is one set of validators, right? The entire network agrees on who has stake and who has the authority to vote and produce blocks. Now, because SCP is federated, there is no one global set of validators. Rather, every individual node decides who they view as a validator. And then, so long as you have enough overlapping groups, you then are able to have a actual connected network. And so I think it's just a fundamental power switch, right? So proof of stake is very much a top-down algorithm. The algorithm decides who is trustworthy based on stake. If there's some mining pool or some entity that has 60% stake, you have to listen to them, right? If you don't like it, then you have to maybe get the rest of the stake to vote them out, but that's almost never happened in practice. So realistically, if you don't like whoever has the most stake, you have to leave. Stellar works fundamentally differently. Power and control is bottom up. So you, as a local validator, decide who is trustworthy. And if enough other people agree, then that node is trustworthy, right? And so the authority actually comes from the masses. Whereas on proof of stake, authority comes from whoever has the most money, the oligarchs.
Right. No question. And I think, this goes into my next question, right? Where I feel like there's like financial difficulty for people, right? Where there's barriers of access to certain instruments or products if they don't have the financial capacity. There's also technical limitations for people. Insofar as like, folks who are using staking for yield opportunities that might not be technical, like how difficult is this for someone who's non-technical to benefit from as well? Like the regular retail user?
Well, I think it's the crypto degen, if you will, right?
Yeah.
They are actually profiting a lot off of MEV. And so you mentioned yield stake. Yield stake comes from two different things. The first is from the actual protocol rewards, and then you also make money off of the MEV, right? And so if your use case is to just buy a token, stake it, and maximize your profit as much as possible, then this whole MEV thing is great, But if you just want to, live your everyday life and say, use USDC, get paid in USDC. If you have, a family overseas and you want to swap USDC for EuroCs or or like a stable coin, like
Right.
a peso stable coin or something like that, then you don't want to have these high fees.
Right.
And so if you're strictly a crypto degen and you're trying to optimize for your crypto profitability, then yeah, Stellar's not the place for you. But if you're interested in real world assets, if you're interested in just doing everyday financial product or services in the way that is the least extractive to your customers, then Stellar, I think, is really the only blockchain you can consider because it has this trust model that actually allows you as the product, you as the issuer, to decide who is trustworthy for your customers.
I love that. And so there's going to be a new influx of business. I mean, we've all seen this the more that we've worked in the industry, that there's a continuous flow of new builders, small businesses, big businesses. You talked about the institutions coming in. So for, let's say, a small business trying to get involved and who's listening to this talk and is really inspired by it, what's the process for someone to get involved?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to start building on Stellar. I think we have a very large ecosystem of on and off ramps. We have an ecosystem of smart contract primitives. We have a great Discord group. We have a grant program, and so I think there's lots of sort of opportunity that once you decide that Stellar is where you want to build on, there's lots of resources for you to start to start that journey. I think what's most important is that before you start that journey, to really research and understand what you're getting into, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at the EVM ecosystem, you have tons of centralization with layer twos. You have downtime issues. Like for instance, when Azure went down, Base also went down because it was all running, or AWS rather.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think before you start your crypto journey, it's important to understand what the actual incentives are, right? The incentive in these proof of stake algorithms is for the network to make the most money. That money is coming from somewhere.
Right.
If you're not running a validator and you're just building a product, that money is coming from you. Whereas Stellar is one of the only blockchains where validators don't get paid. There's no incentive, there's no financial incentive. And so that just means that you are actually getting the best bang for your buck. When you are using the Stellar network, you are not being extracted from, and you can just see that from the network itself.
That's amazing. Very cool, man. What are some of the other things that Stellar is working on right now that have you super fired up?
I think privacy is our number one thing right now.
Really?
I think we just in January upgraded the network to support a bunch of privacy primitives.
Nice.
So we now fully support confidential tokens. We have ZK verifiers on chain. All the building blocks required for full ZK transaction execution and confidential payments. And so I'm really excited for that. Now it's still new. The layer one primitives are there. There's still a lot of work to be done to build on top of those.
Yeah.
But we're starting to see some ecosystem folks start building, and I'm really excited for it.
I'm really excited too. And I think one of the things that, it had me so excited to be doing this fireside with you and just hearing all this, right, is like Stellar's mission has been fundamentally unchanged since launch. Like, I think I heard Vitalik talk about how there's a lot of people in crypto where they're looking at each other as competitors. He's like, we're not each other's competitors. It's the centralized systems that we're trying to dismantle and fix, lower the barrier of access to education, lower the barrier of access to financial empowerment, give people the tools to build permissionlessly. And it's really inspiring that you guys have, you haven't shifted with the narrative. You haven't pivoted. You've stayed 10 toes down to the mission. And how does privacy fold into, if at all, with this, basically stopping of MEV?
Well, I mean, I guess for the MEV, it's not really particularly related.
Right.
So MEV primarily targets like trading.
Right.
As well as some other, sort of like purchases. Like for instance, like if you have tickets online, someone can snipe the ticket and upsell you for something like that as well. But for privacy, we really are focused on it just for everyday financial use cases. So payroll is a big one, right? We love stablecoins. We've been doing RWAs for over a decade now, way before they were cool.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do payroll when how much you're paying all your employees is public. And so I think just confidential token transfers to be able to pay employees all over the world in US dollars is super powerful.
Agreed.
And I think that's a high priority right now.
Agreed. Now that's really beautiful, man. So it's the kind of thing, just if I'm picking up the through line, I'm someone who's participating in Stellar. I'm running a validator. I'm participating in the growth of the network. And at the same time, I'm able to do private transactions, right? If I then wanted to benefit from MEV, I could use what I've earned and done here and go across. But you basically have the option for both, it sounds like, where you guys are saying, look, MEV makes sense for the people it makes sense for. We're providing a pathway for the people who it doesn't.
Well, I think again, if you are the one extracting the value, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
If you want to make a market maker, if you want to run a high frequency trading hedge fund and front run people, be my guest.
Yeah.
That's not what we're building on Stellar.
And I love that, man. And you guys have never been that way. And I love that you never changed. And shout out to Stellar and shout out to the builders that are doing it right. That's fucking amazing, man. I appreciate
Thanks
your
for
time.
having me, bro.
Is there anything that you want to say to the audience before we step out?
No, you can always follow me. I'm on Twitter at GTTYSON. I always post lots of spicy takes like this one on other consensus algorithms, and I love talking about crypto. So let me know.
Can I ask for one spicy take before we leave? What's the spiciest take that you've had in like the past week or two?
I don't know if it's spicy anymore after Vitalik's post, but L2s kind of suck.
Walk me through it.
Kind of pointless.
Walk me through it. Let's get it. We're recording this.
Well, I mean, okay, like just build a better L1. Like we have high TPS. We don't need an L2. So I don't know. I just feel like, yeah, you need an L2 if you're, Ethereum can do 20 transactions a second. We have 10 times that on our daily average. So, what's the point of an L2 if you can make a good L1?
If new age builders listen to this, they were planning on building an L2. They're like, shit, it's time to pivot. What is the opportunity that you see in the industry right now? What's not being built that needs to be built?
I think end-to-end products, right? I think there's lots of very interesting stuff in the space where there's different, yield-bearing protocols. There's lots of smart contracts. But I don't think we necessarily need smart contracts. We need applications, right? So that smart contract or that application might require a smart contract. But I'd rather see people actually, build things for real people, for real users, instead of just, building more on-chain infra for the sake of on-chain infra.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And for folks that are listening to this and they were like, God damn, Stellar's lit. Where can they learn more docs to get educated if they're a builder, or just like, what's the best place to get their education started with Stellar?
I mean, Stellar.org has all of our docs. It has links to our Stellar Community Fund. We have a Discord channel as well. If you have more questions, I'll answer them there.
I think that's a wrap, man. That was fucking amazing.
All right, thanks for chatting, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.